Where did Cain's wife come from? I'm answering your question, and this one is really fascinating. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. It's raining on our walk today. So for those of you who didn't do the reading, let me fill you in. This is Genesis chapter 4. The basic outline is that after Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden, they know each other. That's a euphemism the Bible uses for doing the things that you do to have kids. And Adam and Eve have two kids, Cain and Abel. And then there's a story about Cain and Abel giving an offering to God. And that offering is the source of a lot of drama between Cain and Abel. And Cain ultimately kills Abel. And then God punishes Cain and tells him that he's going to be a wanderer. Cain gets really anxious. He's afraid that there's going to be somebody that kills him. Then Cain gets married, has a kid named Enoch. He founds a city named after Enoch, and there's this lineage that is given, Cain's lineage that is given, where it talks about Cain's children and grandchildren. And then it says, and then Adam knew his wife again, and they have another son, Seth. And that's sort of where that chapter ends. The problem comes when you read these chapters in order: Genesis chapter 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. There are problems. At the end of Genesis chapter 3, there's two people, Adam and Eve. And then you add Cain and Abel. And when Cain and Abel get in a fight, Cain kills Abel. And then after he is being punished by God, he is scared that somebody else is going to kill him. Where do those people come from? Because at that point, it appears that there's just three people, Adam and Eve and Cain. And then Cain has a wife. Where does she come from? Again, at that point, there should just be three people, Adam and Eve and Cain. The answer is as simple as it is interesting. For a long, long time, biblical scholars have agreed that these chapters in Genesis and that the entirety of the Old Testament is composed of a bunch of different sources that have been redacted, have been put together into what we have received today. Now, this isn't a unique thing. This isn't unusual. A lot of really, really old texts that we have are actually a conglomeration of a number of different texts. But what data do they use to discover that and to support it? This is also pretty easy to understand just from your own experience. Right, when you read works by different authors, you can tell that it's different authors or different kids in a class because they use different metaphors, different grammar, different syntax, different vocabulary. The vocabulary piece is one of the simple ways to see this in the Old Testament. Each of these different traditions seems to have a different primary name for God: Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Elohim, and so scholars have looked and said, you know what, when they use Yahweh, there is similar syntax, similar grammar, similar way they talk about things, similar metaphors, and when they use Elohim, the same kind of thing. And you can do this with Genesis chapters 3 and 4 and even 5. They appear to be written by different authors. So at the end of Genesis chapter 3, that's the end of the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden story. There's an abrupt transition between Genesis chapter 3 and Genesis chapter 4. There's also different grammar and syntax and vocabulary. All of that stuff is different. The author of Genesis chapter 4 appears to be assuming a fully populated world, not just Adam and Eve at the beginning and then Cain and Abel after Adam and Eve have their sons. The same thing happens between chapter 4 and chapter 5. Chapter 5 uses different grammar and syntax. It uses a different name for God, and it talks differently about the way that God relates to humanity. This is a priestly source. And this isn't really a problem. I mean, it makes the narrative a little disjointed. There are plot holes in the narrative as it exists. The only problem comes when you are trying to imagine that the Bible is univocal, that it speaks with one voice, one consistent narrative. There is broad agreement on this. It is roundly rejected by the vast majority of biblical scholars. And the people who want to make this assertion have to go through some wild interpretive loops and actually have some pretty erroneous interpretations of certain words in the text. So where did Cain's wife come from? Well, the simple answer is from other people, other cities, because that part of the story doesn't assume an unpopulated earth. It assumes that it is a fully populated earth, and so of course there are other people for Cain to marry because they're just in the next city. But more importantly, while it is fun to find the plot holes and try to figure out why they're there and to understand all the different sources that are involved in a text, that is in no way necessary to read the Bible and get the beautiful, wonderful, good meanings out of it that have been informing the lives of people for thousands of years. So there's nothing you need to do. You don't have to go to seminary to understand the Bible. You can just read it, but you need to read it with that understanding that there are multiple sources. And when you stumble upon something like this, it likely has some sort of explanation in the source material itself. But if you are interested in these kind of things, my recommendation for what to read that has all of the depth but is written in plain everyday language is called The History of the Bible by John Barton. You should check it out.